This episode is brought to you by Progressive, a leader in boat insurance. Welcome aboard to Carefree Boating. Here, we don't worry about the what-ifs, because we explore with Progressive Boat Insurance for as little as $100 per year for a basic liability policy. Progressive also offers a variety of other coverages and can help you cover repair costs when you need it. And with discounts like multi-policy, safety courses, responsible driver, and more, your mind can really float free. Cruise on over to Progressive.com to get a quote today and see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Rate and discounts not available in all states or situations.
So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. And that means thousands of can't-miss deals just in time for summer.
The denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses.
I always find something amazing.
Plus, buy it online and pick it up in-store the same day for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. And now, you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. Important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Welcome back to the Red Treehouse. Even though I've not gone anywhere and have still been producing episodes, it's been just over 2 months since I told you a real-life scary story to keep you up at night. Of course, I love sharing original, listener-submitted, and classic horror stories, but I am excited to dive back in as we march steadily towards episode 200 and the 2-year anniversary of the show. And as you listen, you may hear some claps of thunder or a torrential downpour. It's actually raining right outside where I record. For this episode, I'll give a content warning right up front. Today's story is tragic and horrifying, and contains graphic descriptions of child abuse, assault, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. It's a case that stumped investigators for 65 years, until 2022, when a major breakthrough broke the case wide open. And if you searched for this case, you might see it come up as America's unknown child. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the tragic and eerie case of the boy in the box. Who was he? What happened to him? And who's responsible? I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. The Fox Chase neighborhood in northeast Philadelphia sits nearly 10 miles from downtown. A quaint area, Fox Chase is synonymous with two fascinating and contrasting truths. It was once home to the affluent, who built mansions and hunted on the land. And in 1957, it became the setting for, quote, one of America's longest-running cold cases, end quote. On February 25, 1957, a young man checking his animal traps stumbled across a horrifying scene. A young boy of indeterminate age was found wrapped in a plaid blanket and laid in a cardboard box. His arms were folded across his stomach, and it appeared as if he was asleep. Upon closer inspection, the young man discovered that the young boy was in fact dead. Thinking the police would confiscate his traps and possibly fine him for laying them out in the first place, the young man kept the discovery to himself. A few days later, another young man tracked a rabbit running through some underbrush, and knowing several traps were laid out, followed the rabbit into the wooded area. There, he discovered the body of the young boy, still in the same location and position as when he was first discovered a few days before. Except, like the first young man, he was also hesitant to report it to police, and he waited until the next day to contact them, and only after hearing about the death of a young girl, Mary Jane Barker. There's something interesting. While researching, I came across the name of the second young man who found the body, Frederick Benosis, and another reason why he may have been in the woods in the first place. He was peeping on an all-girls boarding school just beyond the woods. I couldn't find many more references or details to this, so I'm only sharing it as a side note. Upon closer inspection, investigators discovered a harrowing scene. The young boy was nude, severely malnourished, and had seemingly been beaten to death before being placed in a large box that once held a bassinet. Other details were alarming. He'd recently been given a haircut, possibly after death, as there were hair clippings still on and around his body, and his fingernails had been trimmed. A New York Times article, dated January 1st, 2007, featured an interview with Elmer Palmer, the first police officer on the scene. He stated, quote, "It looked like a doll. Then I saw it wasn't a doll. The boy's hair had been cut, crudely, either just before or just after death, so his body was flecked with hairs." He recalled shivering in his raincoat, thinking, "What a shame. At least this will be resolved quickly. They had so many leads." End quote. As investigators immediately went to work, an autopsy confirmed what they suspected. The unidentified boy had been beaten to death. And there was more. Quote, "He had been ill and undernourished. His body bore several small scars that looked like surgical incisions." End quote. He had a 1.5-inch scar on the left side of his chest and a round scar on his elbow. He also had an L-shaped scar on his chin and a strange incision on his left ankle, a cut-down incision which exposed a vein to give a blood transfusion. He was about 3.5 feet tall and weighed approximately 30 pounds. Though officials hoped for a quick resolution, frustration mounted as evidence was scarce and leads quickly hit a dead end. The harsh Pennsylvania winter proved to be a major hurdle, as cold weather slowed down the decomposition process, which in turn made narrowing the time of death much more difficult. And though it was suspected the boy had been dead for several days, it was possible that he'd been dead for several weeks. No doubt, investigators were hoping someone, maybe a parent or relative, would come forward and ask for help locating their missing child or loved one, or that someone would hear of the child and come forward with information that could lead to his identification. Unfortunately, none of that happened, and the investigation hit a wall almost from the start. As evidence was collected, a corduroy cap was found near the boy's body. It was traced to a nearby store, and the store owner recalled seeing a man in his 20s come into her store just a few days before. He asked the store owner to sew a strap onto the cap, but he was alone, and without any identifying features or details, the man was never found. I mentioned earlier that the boy was found in a cardboard box that once held a bassinet. Police traced the box to a nearby store, which had sold a dozen bassinets between December 1956 and February 1957. The store had a cash-only policy, and while this would normally be a dead end, investigators were able to track down all but one buyer. Unfortunately, it proved to be another dead end, as no one had any connection to the boy. With their frustration growing, investigators pulled out all the stops. They interviewed doctors and surgeons. Newspapers printed the boy's face in their daily editions. Photographs were mailed in monthly utility bills and placed in storefronts. Daycares and orphanages were checked, but no one recognized the boy. Now desperate, investigators went a step further. They, quote, dressed the corpse and photographed it in a sitting position, then distributed the pictures in the hope that the more lifelike appearance would jog someone's memory, end quote. But no matter what they did, no one came forward with information or additional leads. The case hit a wall, and in a short time, it turned completely cold. The lack of viable leads inevitably led to the rise of various theories about the boy's identity. One prominent theory suggested he was a Hungarian refugee who emigrated to the United States during the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. Also known as the Hungarian Uprising, on October 23, 1956, several university students protested the growing Soviet influence. The demonstrations quickly grew to a full-scale revolution, including the formation of a new government. But 11 days later, on November 4th, the Soviet Union invaded, crushing the rebellion and ending the revolution. Despite this, over 3,000 Hungarians were killed, and another 200,000 fled the country and became refugees. It was theorized that the young boy and his family may have been among those who left Hungary and settled in America. Others believed, quote, he could have been the son of carnival workers who had several children die under strange circumstances, end quote. While this may seem far-fetched, investigators actually interviewed several carnival workers, but as with other leads, it turned out to be a dead end. Officials briefly investigated, quote, a family who operated a nearby foster home, but ruled them out as suspects, end quote. In a fascinating scenario, a woman told police that her mother bought the young boy from his birth parents sometime in 1954 and kept him locked in the basement of her Philadelphia home. One day, in the heat of anger and rage, she killed the young boy, wrapped him in a blanket, placed him in a box, and discarded the body where it was later found. According to the woman, the young boy was disabled and subjected to extreme abuse for over 2 years. She told investigators that one night the boy became sick after eating dinner, and after vomiting his food, was severely beaten, including having his head banged against the floor. Sometime later that evening, the boy died while being given a bath to clean him up. She alleges that her mother forced her to dump the boy's body, and that while they were in the process of doing this, a motorist pulled up to see if they needed help. They convinced the man that they were fine, and he drove off, none the wiser. Here's what's fascinating. The young boy was found with a strange brown substance in his throat, and the coroner speculated that it could have been vomited up at some point prior to his death. Additionally, the boy's fingertips were pruny from being submerged in water for an indeterminate amount of time. And a male witness claimed he placed the box in the woods. The running theory is that the two women disposed of the young boy by placing him in the bassinet box that was already at the scene. It would also explain why no one came forward to claim the boy's body, because if he was purchased by the young woman's mother and subsequently killed by the same woman, then there would be no one to claim him as missing. Authorities, in fact, found the woman's story compelling and credible, but upon further investigation, they could find no proof to substantiate her claims. And like before, the case hit another dead end. The boy in the box, who at this point was still unnamed, was eventually buried in Ivy Hill Cemetery, a less than 15-minute drive from where his body was discovered in Fox Chase. Despite investigators' extraordinary efforts to identify the young boy and to capture his killer, weeks turned to months, months to years, and years to decades without a break in the case. In 1998, 41 years after his death, the boy's body was exhumed to collect DNA evidence. Technological advances offered some hope that he could finally be identified. It took over 2 years for DNA to be extracted from a tooth, as it had degraded substantially over time. Then, in 2019, 62 years after his death, enough DNA was extracted to perform a genealogical test. the results were uploaded to DNA databases, and for the first time, authorities caught a major break. In December 2022, 65 years after his death, officials secured a court order allowing them to access vital records for any child born to who they suspected was the boy's mother between 1944 and 1956. After 6 decades and tens of thousands of work hours from hundreds of investigators, the boy in the box had a birth certificate and a name: Joseph Augustus Zarelli. With a major piece of the puzzle now firmly in place, investigators were still searching and hoping for the next most important question: who killed 4-year-old Joseph? In the nearly 3 years since Joseph was identified, authorities have continued to work on the case as it remains an open and active investigation. Joseph Augustus Zarelli was buried under a weeping cherry tree just inside the front gates of Ivy Hill Cemetery, and initially the headstone read, quote, "America's Unknown Child," end quote. Now, with his identity firmly established, his name is etched into the grave marker. And in January 2023, a ceremony was held to dedicate his new headstone. To this day, visitors often leave flowers, and on special occasions and holidays, gifts, decorations, and toys. Unfortunately, as of this recording, his killer remains unknown, and it's possible their identity may be lost to the passage of time. I remember first hearing about this case a few years ago because he was identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli, and it's always haunted me because what kind of person does this to a young child with no regard or remorse? At its core, this case is horrific: child abuse, neglect, murder, and abandonment. And for what? There's nothing on earth this child could have done for this to have been inflicted upon him. On the other side of this case are the dedicated detectives and investigators who worked tirelessly for over 6 decades to keep his memory and story alive. Many of the officers who worked on the case have passed away, and it's likely a good number of them didn't get to hear his name. But make no mistake, their efforts were a major contributing factor in his identification. Now, we can only hope that his killer is brought to justice, even if only in name. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with this lingering question: who killed Joseph Augustus Zarelli on that cold day in February 1957? I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.